Okay, good morning. Thank you very much. I know it's very early Sunday morning. I'm impressed this many people managed to get up, given how many people were awake late last night. So my name's Sukh. I'm not sure how many people have seen or heard my bits and pieces before, but I focus on around universal law and universal number. So just to give you a quick overview, today we'll go through what universal divine natural law is, different names ultimately for what we call the sort of top tier of a governance. And then I'll go into how that goes from being sort of the creator down to the law that we see and the material world that we see manifest around us. So what are the connections between that? I suspect everything that I'll go through today you'll have heard at some point. But what most people say is we've heard the stuff that you talk about, but we haven't heard it arranged in the way that you arrange it. Okay, so I call it, like I'll put it into Fisher-Price terms is the way that I put it, because I like things in Fisher-Price terms because I can understand them that way. So if we start universal law, the law comes from above. Ultimately, it comes from the creative force or creator, however we see that. And universal law, natural law, God's law, divine law, has a number of different names, is the idea that we are all manifest with a certain inherent sense of right and wrong. Everyone is instilled with a sense of right and wrong if the only context is when it's done to them. So even if you take the beloved rulers of the current paradigm, they probably don't feel any pain when they're inflicting it on other people, but when it's done to them, they know that a wrong has been done to me. So everyone knows that when a wrong's done to them. If we take a small child, 2 or 3 years old, if we set them in the corner, I give them some toys and some sweets and we let them find their peace and they're settled. If I go and grab that stuff and walk out, there'll be a reaction. That reaction hasn't been put into words. They haven't been educated for that reaction. But they know that I was sat here peacefully and that hairy git has come and breached my peace. Right? And what the melee that you're left with is that natural law sense of injustice. And so it's really the unwritten level of law. It's that innate sense that we have. And it's that over time, great minds have tried to capture. So whether that's in the Vedic scriptures from Himalayan mountains, whether that's in the Abrahamic lineage through the Torah or the Quran or the Gospels, all of those are expressions of that natural universal law at a different time, space and circumstance. And often those expressions, those great expressions of natural law, have occurred at times of tyranny. So if we have a look, we know Yeshua, Christ, was up against the Roman tyranny and the Pharisees of the time. The Sikh gurus were up against the Mughal tyranny of the time. And so where that greatest darkness has been, the greatest light has had to come from those same places. And that we see that as a natural law, yin and yang effect, right? The brighter you shine, the darker the shadows you'll cast. Right? That's a key bit to remember for a lot of people that are in the love and light realm of the movement. We mustn't lose touch with the darkness. It's important to keep that because we're made of both the light and the dark. We have to remain in balance. You know, if you have nothing but light, you'll blind yourself. If you go home and turn the television to full brightness, full contrast, you'll get a headache after a little while. All right, so there has to be the balance there. The truth is at the balance point because the opposite of the Prince of Darkness, who is Satan, is not God. It's the Prince of Light, who's Lucifer. Satan appeals to your vices, crudely, page 3, drink this, do that. Lucifer is far more subtle. Lucifer has you virtue signaling. He appeals to your generosity. He makes you think you're doing great things. One of the best examples of Lucifer nuance and sophistication is on Amazon Original. There's something called Power of the Rings, which is the Silmarillion from Lord of the Rings, for those people who are into Lord of the Rings. The Silmarillion is the bit that comes even before The Hobbit. And it goes through. And in there, when Sauron lands, he goes into the realm of the elves. He's in Rivendell and that. And the way he has to manipulate the elves is he can only do it using virtue. The elves are masters of vice. They're not interested. You can't tempt them with vice. But he shows where a lot of people that have run away from the cabal and the darkness have run into that pure light. And there's a balance in between. The Lord is at a balance point. And duality is at either side of that. And that's a really important aspect to remember, is that a lot of time they trap us in duality by thinking there's an either or, and it isn't. There's two extremities and there's a balance point, hot and cold. It's a good example of that. Right? No one would try and argue that either hot or cold are the ultimate, because if you try and live in the extremity of either, you're not going to live for very long. So it's about that balance point. And if we read throughout the ancient texts, throughout all of the scriptures, it's about finding the balance. It's not about trying to eradicate one side or the other. And how do we start to ascertain it? How can we put that paradigm into something that we can experience on a daily basis? So for me, I'm going to go a little bit into this before we've just started to outline natural law. But from here, I have to go into universal number to explain this aspect of duality a little bit. Because before we go into this duality of lawful versus legal, it's important to realise that legal isn't satanic in and of itself as a system. A system is just a set of processes and resources and infrastructure. It has no ability to have any form of direction until someone picks it up and operates it. And so you have two opposing systems in legal and lawful. But why do we have this duality? How does it manifest around us? If we go back to pre-1600s, when someone was considered to be liberal, they were considered to be educated. Because liber came from the etymology of things as we understand, library, etc. It meant to be well read. It didn't mean I can pretend to be a lady or a goldfish or a dolphin. Liberal meant that someone had actually been educated in the 7 subjects known as the 7 classical arts. And the 7 classical liberal arts are defined in such a way that you'll start to recognise this paradigm. In the material universe that we're in, and just to give you some context, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates were all educated using this education system. Everyone that was in elite education up until the 1600s is educated using this system, because it teaches you how to think for yourself and how to learn for yourself. What it doesn't do is teach you arbitrary static facts to memorise and then regurgitate in an exam. And there's a great essay by a lady called Dorothy Sayers from 1947, The Lost Tools of Learning. And if you read that, you'll be like, I can't believe this was written then. Because I'm thinking of the education system now, and I think when I went the education system, it was all right. Well, read that and you'll realise even when you went through the education system, it was a proverbial word I probably shouldn't use at this time of the morning. So how does it go? This material world numerical world that we're in, this universe, the material universe, is made up of number in 4 formats. There's pure number, sacred arithmetic. There's number mapped in space, which is geometry. Okay, so dimensions of the planet, etc., is number mapped in space. You've got number mapped in time, harmonics, frequency, vibration. Then you have number mapped in space and time. So at a macro level, we could take the celestial objects doing their dance through the skies, the planets. And at a micro level, saw brothers and sisters doing Tai Chi and yoga and stuff this morning. So everything that we experience in this material world is number in one of these 4 formats. And there you'll also get the space-time conundrum and stuff. You start to understand it's time and space. Everything's mapped in. As we go through this universe and we explore it and we touch it and we taste it, we do so with our 5 senses. Our 5 senses sense the contrast in the dualities that this material world is fabricated from. Light and dark, sweet and salty, bass and treble, left and right, all of those positive, negative, all of it that we have, the opposites, they're all a duality. And we've been manifesting this. As a universal singularity, at that universal law perspective, everything is one. Everything is one absolute infinite love and consciousness and energy. And from that, in this manifestation, in this dimension, everything becomes split. So it becomes an experience. And that experience is fed to us through our five senses of the material world. Okay, this is of the physical world, not of the metaphysical, not of that which we only can experience but not see, hear, touch, taste, right, or smell, right? So this is how the material world is constructed. And as we go through with our five senses, we sense that contrast. And part of that contrast is love and fear. And as we go through with the material items, if they're there, if I said to you, describe the phone to me, you'll be able to describe it. It's smooth, it's hard, it's cold. You know, aspects of it may be soft. Because it's physical. I could ask you anything, the pole, describe it to me. Straight away, you'll start describing it to me. But if I say to you now, please start to write down the answer. Describe anxiety. Or describe love. Or describe the Creator. It's much more difficult. You'll have to go into allegory, parables, metaphor, in order to describe it. Because they are not physical. They are metaphysical. They are experiences. And words are never designed to describe the metaphysical. They were only ever designed to describe the physical universe in which we travel through. In fact, the numerical universe that we travel through. And as we travel through it, so we've got the 4 modes of number, the 5 senses that we use to travel through this environment and sense it. And as we go through, we want to start describing it. We want to communicate it. So then we have the 3 tiers of language, 3 tiers of communication of how we communicate out. They are grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Okay? So those of you who've got a bit of paper, or if you've had it so far, well, you'll notice that what we put together is the Pythagoras triangle. Okay? 4 along the bottom, 5 along the diagonal, and 3 along the side. This is the true origin of the Pythagoras triangle, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. This is where it actually comes from. This is also, for those of you who've come across it, is the cornerstone to the golden ratio. Okay, this is not a coincidence. What I'm describing to you is the blueprint for the material universe. And everyone was educated this way. Because those words can only express the numerical universe that we sense, it's all numerical. That's why when Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. Numerics. Sacred harmonics in particular in that instance that he's talking about. And as we travel through, we have a look. Now, the reason that fake news works is because people haven't been educated in the 7 classical liberal arts. If someone's educated in grammar, logic, and rhetoric, fake news won't work. And I'll give you examples of that so you can see why that's the case. But because the words represent a numerical system, words themselves, when they are in correct grammatical structure, have numerical integrity. That's why things like gematria work. Those people come across gematria and stuff. I assume most people here haven't. If you haven't, just put your hands up quickly. Gematria was A is 1, B is 2, 3 is C, D is 4. Right? When you put them together and you add the words together, they make a number, and that numerology starts to give vibration and frequency. Okay, so people will say Satan is 666 and stuff like that, right? So it starts to give. But all of that is number and vibration, and it comes back to the phonetics and the way things resound. The alphabet letters are not by accident. As you start to go through them, you'll realise the letters and shapes and sounds that they make are relevant. They make particular frequencies which are related to the occult energy that each letter has, which represents the sound and the environment that we live in. And everything comes back to it. 432 hertz music, right, comes back to that. Every colour has a frequency. And that's how everything becomes intertwined. Okay, so if we go into the bowels of Satan, which is like the stock market, for example, and we go there, they can't get away from it. If you want to operate in the stock market or you want to deal on cryptocurrencies, you have to learn sacred number. Because the Fibonacci number sequence is how the stock market runs. And the Fibonacci number sequence comes from the golden ratio in mathematics. Because the stock market is controlled, and we had one in the last 24 hours or so, it was a full moon. The moon controls two things for us, fundamentally two things: water and time. That's what the moon is the time bearer and the water bearer. It controls the tides. Even those people that they say astrology and astronomy, all that stuff is nonsense. We say, well, does the moon not control the tides? And if it controls the tides, which is the largest body on Earth, does it not control the 2/3 of water which is in this minuscule body? Does it have no effect on that? Just from an energetic perspective, forget the rest of it. It also controls the ladies' sacred tide once a month. And it's probably not a secret if they all move into the same house, they all synchronize, because all the electromagnetics in that house are exactly the same. Right? And so the time bear, 13 perfect months of 28 days and one rest day. That's how it's supposed to be. The leap year thing is like, it's children here, but WTF, leap year? It's crazy. I never got my head around that. As a kid, I couldn't understand it. And now I'm much more comfortable with life. Now I understand that mental state that is a leap year. Because the lunar calendar is the proper calendar you're supposed to follow. That's why when they changed it from lunar calendar to something else, the propaganda was everyone that followed the lunar calendar was a lunatic. Right? Because they were following the traditional calendar. And the financial calendar still follows the lunatic calendar. Still it's the 1st of April. They didn't change that. Because they're harvesting that energy, but they made everyone else laugh at that and celebrate it on the 1st of January. But the reason they've got away with that is because they can use fallacy, like they did in coronavirus. So if people have been trained in grammar, logic and rhetoric formally, when someone said to you, you need to take the vaccine because the NHS said so, you'd say, well, that's appeal to authority. That's not a logical argument for having the vaccine, just because the NHS said so. It's not proof. It's not evidence. Well, if you don't take it, you'll lose your job. Well, that's appeal to fear. That's not a logical argument. You're appealing to fear because you haven't got a logical argument which can convince me, so now you're trying to scare me into it. Well, if you don't do it, Granny and Grandad are going to die. Well, that's appeal to emotion. It's also appeal to fear, arguably. There's still not a reason for me to do it. But there's a pandemic, so you have to do all these things. Well, the fact there's a pandemic, if there was a genuine pandemic, then lockdowns and masks and vaccines might seem plausible. But the fact that you're basing all that on a pandemic doesn't exist. The pandemic is what you would know as a slippery slope. Because if you remove the pandemic, all the premises and everything that relies on it falls down the slope, slippery slope. A lot of these are known as the Aristotelian logical fallacies. And I've got, for those of you taking notes, if you go to minds.com/sovereign mind, I've put a blog together. On there's a Google Drive link. And the 42 fallacies are on there. There's only 21 or 42 ways to lie to anyone in any language. Once you know what they are, no one will be able to deceive you.
Just say that again, please.
Minds.com, so plural of mind, /sovereign mind. And there's a blog there, and there's loads of links, and some of the talks that I've done in the past and stuff are on there. But the Google Drive link has the PDF to the 42 fallacies in it. And you could probably find it online as well. And it shows you the predicate logic, for those who understand conditional logic. It actually goes through the mathematical logic of those, and you'll start to see that come to life. I pulled my son out of school when he was 11. My mum's retired head teacher, by the way, so I had some knowledge in what I was doing. I had some idea. And my background is a corporate troubleshooter. I used to run a troubleshooting corporation in London that was my own, and I troubleshoot like government, BBC, artificial intelligence agencies. So I've seen Agenda 2030 on the inside being built. It's not a myth. I saw, we were part of building it. Right, so we're well aware of what's going on. But how did they do it? When I was at university, Bombay Sapphire gin was about 45 to 50 pounds a bottle. And it was the gin to drink. And when you went out, if you drank that gin, you were the boy. Today you can go into Morrison's and get 2 bottles for 15 quid. That's one hell of a bargain, if it's the same gin. But it's the same logo, and it's the same bottle, so the grammar is the same. The typeface, the input looks exactly the same. So everyone runs into Morrison's and buys 2 bottles for 15 quid, dissolving their liver in the process, because that recipe is no longer the botanical gin that a founder created, because a private equity firm has since bought that out. And they've taken that and they've replaced it. It's a cheaper glass bottle. It's the same branding. And because there's no critical thinking applied and our ego assumes we understand what that symbol means, we buy it. Without any understanding or critical thinking of how was that, which was 50 quid in Waitrose, now 15 quid for 2 bottles in Morrison's. That's an example of fake news in the commercial world, fooling people into value and quality. And I can give you umpteen examples. I had a big argument with my dad. My dad's like been as fit as a butcher's dog. He's like 80 years old. He was playing squash. They gave him a Peter Pan certificate. I had to make a certificate up for an old geezer that won't die, basically, right? Because he was still playing squash. And he got to the point and he just started getting Parkinson's. And I try to explain to him, you've got to stop eating the food and drink. But he won't do it because he recognises the logos that have served him well. And I had to sit him down and go, that Gatorade that we used to drink in the 80s when you used to take me to Wembley, it had 5 ingredients in it. And I managed to get the label from the Gatorade from the 1980s. And it was water, lemon juice, salt, sugar and citric acid, and that was it. And I got the label from today. And today's Gatorade has got 25 ingredients in it, most of which you can't pronounce. And I said to him, that's why I'm telling you to stop drinking it. Because what you understood it to be, it is no longer that. He won't stop. He won't stop. Actually, now he's starting to listen because I gave him some very strong RSO cannabis oil and it stopped his tremor. But now he's like, it stopped the tremor, but I can't do anything. I said, you're retired. Why the fuck do you want to do anything? That's your problem. You keep trying to do stuff. You know, you burnt your head out. Chill out and enjoy it. You know, I'd be loving it. But anyway, that's him. That's why he's burnt his head out and that's why he's got the tremor, right? Wherever you put the most stress in your body, that's what will fail later. That's why heavy smokers get lung cancer, heavy drinkers get liver. Someone who worries here all the time will have a heart attack. Both my granddads died of heart attack, but they were both heavy heart people. That's how they operated, generously from the heart, and that's where they died. If you take all your stress here, if you feel it all here, and you don't learn how to dissipate it and manage it, that's where it will go. Right? If you stress about it all up here, this is what will burn out. Right? It's wherever you put that, if you're a mad long distance runner like David Goggins, your knees will run out. Doesn't matter where you put it, wherever that imbalance happens in your body, it will show.
What sort of age is that then?
It depends how hard you do it and from what age you start to do it at. Right? But everything's got to be in balance. That's the point. Wherever people take stress, not what you're doing recreationally, it's what you're doing stressfully. Everyone here probably has drunk at some point or smoked at some point. And you know the difference between when you're doing it recreationally, you might have a fag every 6 hours, and when you're chain smoking and hammering every 15, 20 minutes, or shots of whiskey or whatever your vice is. We've all done it. And we felt the difference between doing something for recreational and then using it as an emotional crutch.
Does it always have to happen now? Is that what you're telling me?
Have you got a vice that you're worried about, so a certain part is going to fail? You don't look that stressed to me, I'll be honest with you. I think this is your first worry in a while, so I don't think you need to worry about it. So that's how it's worked. That's how the fake news and that has managed to take control, because we're no longer educated properly, right? At all. We tell the kids, go and clean your bedroom. Why? Because mum told you to do so. Well, that's appeal to authority. That's not a reason for them to clean their bedroom. And so when kids start to push back, there's actually an innate sense of genuine pushback. You're not giving me a genuine reason for doing what you're asking me to do. You're being lazy and you're using your ego. So, well, I told you to do it, therefore go and do it. Right? So I learnt quickly when I said to him, go and clean your room. And he said, why? I said, because I told you to. He said, well, that's appeal to authority. Why should I clean my room? I said, okay, do you understand pain? Yeah, and he was like, okay. And he's like, okay, I get that one, yeah. Yeah, so he's like, but all of a sudden you find that you're now having to think about what you're asking people to do. And all of a sudden, a lot of what you're asking people to do is complete bullshit because you were asked to do it. And you're just passing that chore on that you were nagged into doing with the same bullshit reason that you were given it. And you'll find stuff that we do it subconsciously because we feel like we should be doing something, so we just repeat what we were told to do. And once you start to think like this is the ultimate antivirus. If there's a genuine global virus, this is the virus. It's that people have not been taught the 7 classical liberal arts.
Here, here.
And it's that the elites can basically run riot because we don't know the difference between truth and lies.
They control the truth.
Well, they control the projection of deception.
Yeah.
Right, they control the perception, but they don't control the truth. But you're right in the sense that
I mean, truth as in what's accepted as truth.
in mainstream, what they will allow to be seen to be accepted as truth is that. But then the ancient texts would tell you that this realm belongs to the Prince of Darkness. The Vedic scriptures tell you this is actually now the Dark Ages we're going into and coming into Aquarius. This is like the Kali Yuga time or the Dark time, which actually is the greatest time to be alive, to use the context off the Shine seminars, what do you call it, jingle, right, for marketing term. Right, because that's what I've always said, it's the greatest time to be alive in the last 6,000 years. Because now we're seeing absolute darkness. But where there's absolute darkness, you also see absolute light shine. Right, we see events like this, you can feel it. It's funny because we're all saying we're high vibing. So prove it. Right, prove it. We're all sat here, we're all happy, we're all smiling, we're all saying we're high, so prove it. Okay, and then I know Eli was telling me that some people came in over the last few days and they tried to create some discordant energy. They put some abuse or some sort of safeguarding claims and they threw those claims around. And within a few moments, because Eli's vibing at the right level, he intuitively understood that what that individual's telling me, their words are not resonating with me. So he's not been trained in the trivium. Like you're not trained in the trivium, but when you go to a used car salesman and he's bullshitting you, you get a gut feel that this guy's, that's not really done 50,000 miles, that car. You can't prove it, but your gut's telling you that. Because the words he's using are fallacious. You haven't structurally understood them and formally understood them to dissect it as being fallacious, but your gut's telling you the resonance isn't right. Very difficult for someone to lie and have their energy lie and project it. So you've got to be Darth Vader level to do that stuff, right? Okay, and that's what will happen as quantum comes in and people have to start using thought, people start using control thought, and the criminals will become thought criminals. They'll start to move into that realm, and then the spiritual masters will also have to hunt them in that realm. That's how it goes. It will all move up. We don't get rid of it. We just up the stakes at the gambling table, that's all. It just becomes more fun. That's it, right? So that's why this is the best time to be alive, because we now can experience that contrast that I said, the light and dark, right, which in the material sense you can experience it, also relates to manifest directly into the spiritual war that we're having. Okay, that's how the material and the spiritual realms are connect. It's through that numerology. That's why they try to turn you off the numerology. They tell you 13 is unlucky, 666 is the devil's, 33 belongs to Freemasons. Well, 33 is the divine number because it's the number of vertebrae in your back. Okay? The vertebrae in your back. They're the levels that you reach, levels of consciousness. As you rise through the chakras, you get to the top. 13, if there were 12 disciples, who was the 13th? It can't be that unlucky then, can it? And then 666, 6 protons, 6 electrons in 6 neurons are the pattern for life. So since when did the devil... All the numerology is in the fabric of the universe because of the trivium quadrivium that I just explained to you. And as you start to go into it, you can start to take it apart and you'll see how all of it interconnects. The sound, the number, the frequency of resonance. In the end, and I don't disappoint people, and I'm not going into that discussion now, it's through that method you'll realise that the planet that we live on is a geodesic structure. It's not a flat structure. What exactly that geodesic is it perfect marble ball? No, of course it isn't. It's bumpy and lumpy, but ultimately it's geodesic because that's how matter forms in electromagnetic forces in torus loops and toroidal loops. Things form in those sacred geometry. And you'll see the sacred geometry, right? When you go online, have a look at the template. A lady called Jennifer's put that together and stuff, and you'll see the patterns that exist out of the different frequencies and the different maths that come out.
Okay, so can I sort of ask you to sort of hone you? So what I'm because I'm fascinated with this stuff and the trivium and how we use it in governance, and I know that, you know, so I'm really curious as to sort of, so you're saying we haven't been educated, so come on, educate us, because I want to understand how, because, yeah, so the trivium, I can really see, like I've been in a situation where I'm dealing with somebody with quite, I think, mental health problems, and our conversations, and I see the logical fallacies in what he's saying, and so I'm really feeling the power of the logical fallacies, because I feel once we're caught up in a kind of emotional block,
Yeah.
that the logical fallacies come out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
Because you get desperate, and and because we get lazy. If we were drilled, if you go to a martial artist and you go to strike them, they're drilled to respond to you. The response they'll give you will be clinical. If you go to someone that hasn't been trained, it won't be clinical. It's exactly the same with your mind. If your mind's been, if you try, if my son's not here now, he's 20 now, right? He'll be 21 in November. So he's had 9 years of it, right? And you struggle to bullshit him. It's difficult now to manage him, to be brutally honest with you, right? Because like I've still been conditioned in that old way of thinking. And so I'm having to double think. It's like talking to my grandparents when I was little. I'm having to think in English, then translate into Punjabi. And an argument is difficult to have like that, right? And so it's like that with him. So anything you come out with now, but he picks it out straight away because he's drilled in it. So if that was a situation, he'd be going, well, that's a red herring, that's a slippery slope, that's appeal to emotion, that's appeal to authority. Right? He'd just be firing through it. And that person, you'd just see him crumble. Right? Because that's what happens. And I always say, it's the same when we go to court, but ultimately when you go to court and you call out magician's trick, I was having a conversation this morning, what happens if this was a children's party and there's a magician, and one of the children call out that magician's trick, what happens to that magician? It's finished. It's finished. The kids will start throwing cake at him. Well, if he's lucky, they'll probably eat the cake. Right? So it's the same in this situation. Once you know what the illusion is, they're finished. Just like in The Wizard of Oz. Right? Once you know what the illusion is, you get to the end, you pull it back. What it looked like and what it is isn't the same thing. And that's why a lot of people go, oh, but they're all powerful. You know, what they call the black pillars. It's all doom and gloom. But nature has not made anything all, if it was all doom and gloom, we'd all be done for by now. Their height of power actually was somewhere between, for me, was somewhere between the Victorian times and World War II. Right, Cabal had height of power at that point. Since World War II, between that was their peak. Since then, it's been diminishing returns for them. And you can see that. What sort of, how many people are sat across the globe now having these discussions? Everywhere, all over, all languages, rural and urban. That wasn't happening 10, 15 years ago. It wasn't happening 5 years ago. No. 5 years ago, everyone was shitting themselves. There's a lot, some people still are. But a lot of people, like yourselves now, they've moved out. Okay, we know what the problem is. Now we're focusing on the solutions. Right, some people know my journey, right? I've gone there, I've gone head to head with the government. I've basically zero contact, zero cooperation. Right, and I did that to show people what's the worst they can do if you've actually not caused anyone any loss, harm or injury, which I haven't done. All I've done is say, I'm not dealing with your paperwork, I'm not paying you anything. That's it. Right, but what it did was it removed the fear of what they can actually do to you. I didn't do that so everyone does what I do, because if you've got children or elderly parents or a job, that would be nuts. I was in a fortunate position where I didn't have those things, and my kid was educated and he can punch hard enough to look after himself, so I can go and pick my own fights and he can deal with his own fights. Right, so I was able to do it. But what people can do now is you can pick and choose based on where you're at, what you pick to choose to fight and how. Right, because legal and lawful are both legitimate systems. This is quite important now. We'll go like that. The number bit, if there's more, it is intriguing, but it's endless because it's how the universe is constructed. So we'll carry that into the 11:30 Q&A. If people are interested, we can go through it. And there's books.
I just say at that point that there's the 2 wooden books.
Completely.
Which I've got at home. They're fantastic.
They are fantastic.
One on the trivium, one on the quadrivium.
Yeah, and I've got the links to those on the Google Drive. And also, if you're teaching children, there's one called The Trivium Pursuit. And that's the Appledorn family in America who homeschooled their 7 children. And they've basically put it into a homeschooling syllabus. It's based on Christian principles and Bible for case studies. And that's how they've put it together, but they've put it together. But the trivium principles are universal. It doesn't matter which ancient text you go to, they all cover what I've just said to you. the Torah, the Quran, the Gospels, the Vedas. They can't not cover it because that's how the material universe is constructed. And everything that's not in that triangle is the metaphysical stuff. That's what is occult. Why is it occult? Because it is hidden, not by the Freemasons and the secret societies. It's occult because it's hidden from your five senses by the Creator. How do you sense that which is hidden by the five senses? You have to experience it. You have to experience love. You have to experience anxiety. Right? I can't talk to you and tell you what love feels like if you haven't experienced it. You know, I can't talk to you and explain to you what anxiety feels like if you've never felt it. That's why the psychopaths and sociopaths struggle with love, because they can't feel it. Through either trauma from the birth defect, or through trauma like SRA abuse and stuff like that, the trust mechanisms and those pathways have been blown. Temporarily, there are fixes for that, and that will come in due course now, but at this point they're blown, and that creates the short circuit. Like a blind man can't see. They can't feel compassion and love. So while we have to deal with it, we must also not demonize it, but we have to deal with it. Okay? Because narcissism in and of itself is a really important fundamental part of the duality. The opposite of narcissism is empathy. Well, there's psychopathic narcissists and there's extreme empaths. The reason the psychopathic narcissists have got into power today is because the extreme empaths made the fucking excuses for them and convinced all the moderate lot, well, no, they're all right if you give them a chance. No, you don't understand them like I do, etc., and all that bullshit. That's Lucifer operating because they think they're being virtuous, but they're not being, they're so frightened to call out the darkness that they're not peaceful, they're harmless. To be peaceful, you have to be capable of violence and force and restrain yourself from using it. If you're not capable of violence and force and resolving a situation, you're not peaceful, you're harmless. That's how it is. Many harmless tribes in Africa and India can no longer tell you their story because they're extinct. Because harmless doesn't work. It's fallen into duality. Absolute non-violence at all costs. What, even at your own survival of your own people, of your own divinity? Is that how it works? If you look at nature, is that how nature operates? Does it lie over and say, fuck, okay, fine, you win? Even the gazelle doesn't do that against the lion. It gives it a go or runs away at least.
I've seen a mouse stand up to a cat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. If something's got heart, that's it, because the heart's there. The heart's there, absolutely. And look, 10th master of Sikhism, when he forged us against the Mughal Empire, he said, one of you will have to fight 125,000 of them. But a swallow will take down and hit a hawk. He'll say that. I'll make an eagle, a sparrow take down a hawk. That was what he said, exactly what you've just said, right? It's the same thing. Why? Because one potent truth seeker will destroy 125,000 deceptive people easily. Just like one tea light can light up the whole sports hall, right? Just one little tea light. To dispel darkness doesn't take much light, but it takes a concentration of that light, which is why now what we're seeing is a concentration of those lights coming forward. Because those people who are committed to the Creator and truth at this time are going against all the forces that are being thrown against you. Everything. The propaganda machines in all the realms, the spiritual realms, the financial realms, the psychological realms, the romantic realms, whatever realm you can think of, it's been weaponized. Immigration weaponized, love weaponized, sexuality weaponized, monetary system weaponized, hatches, matches and dispatches, or birth, death and marriage weaponized. That's where they've got to. But we're in the process where we're recognizing that's been weaponized and we're taking back the control from that weaponization process. But how have they weaponized it? A little bit to the discussion you're having as well from a fallacy perspective, because the greatest opponent we have at the moment is that establishment system. If we break it down into how they're actually doing it, it is truth in some of what the common law lots say in terms of it being the birth certificate. But the legal system is not a satanic system in and of itself. If we go into duality and we come into this material universe, there are fundamentally two types of being. Living being and non-living being. At the ultimate level, they're the two types. The law is there to govern living beings. The legal is there to govern non-living beings. Okay, that's why there are two systems, for good reason, because I don't think anyone in their right mind would try and argue that non-living beings should have the same rights and status as living beings. Right? So that's why you have an immediate differentiation in these two types of entity that exist in this realm, right? Taking it at a really high level. The law is what deals with the living. The unwritten law, earlier we ultimately said, don't do unto others what you don't want done to yourself. Right? At an unwritten level, that's basically what all the universal law, natural law documents state. As we start to get into the English common law, what it really states is there's a recognition that in the material realm, there are only three ways in which you can be attacked. Only three ways. If you can protect these three things, you're invincible. It sounds relatively easy. Well, it is in theory, and the ancients knew that. So what are the three things I could do? I could attack you physically, your body. I could attack you mentally, your psychology, mindset. Or I could take your things, your property, right? I can ratify that if you have a look, because all of you today do three things. You always go in and you prove what you are, something you know, and something you hold every time you access your bank account. Why? Because it's something of your body, fingerprint, retina scan, something you know, password, PIN number, or something you hold, a key or a card. Right? There are three parts of security, three ways of authenticating someone. That's it in security. That's why you have those three methods. They're not random. Probably no one may have explained them to you, but they are ratifying that your body, your mind, and your property are yours. And that's a three-way check for security, right? Why? For the same reason, those three material aspects to your being within the Pythagoras triangle are your body, your mind, and your property. So there are three divine laws that protect that. You protect your body in its immediacy and from national tyranny with the right to bear arms. A gun in your hand is worth more than the entire military on the end of a phone. If a burglar is breaking into your house and you are a vulnerable individual, you can't put up a physical fight, but you've got a PPK in your wheelchair and you can get to that window where he's coming in. As he or she comes in, you can end it. Simple. No need to call anyone. Immediate justice served. A delay in justice is injustice. Maxim of law. A delay in justice is injustice. It's one of the most fundamental maxims of law if you're fighting in court today, actually, because all they do is try and delay and adjourn, right? Well, you're breaking the maximum of law there, so I hold you to your obligation. If you're not taking the judge's obligation, I hold you to your Masonic obligation under the Grand Architect of the Universe. We'll go down that path, sunshine, right? But you've taken it, and therefore that's how we hold you to account. Right to bear arms, how you protect your body. And against national tyranny, it means that the fighting age males form militia and go and deal with the bastards. Because the right to bear arms, like Jug Napolitano said in the States, doesn't protect your right to shoot at deer. It protects your right to shoot at the government when they become tyrannical. Important to remember that. That's the body. The mind. The mind is protected, which for me is the jewel in the crown. Those who've seen me out and about on the tours, is annulment by trial by jury. Your psychological protection is your sanity, your justice, your ability to worship freely, eat and drink, smoke, inject freely, move freely, love freely. Okay, it's a Christian principle country. This is a Christian country, but the Constitution is egalitarian. It doesn't force you to be Christian. It's built on Christian principles of love and compassion and honesty and democracy. We'll talk about democracy in its true spiritual sense rather than the weaponized version that's come today. The trial by jury is as powerful as the gun in the hand of the individual when the robber's breaking it. Because the idea of trial by jury is that you get to hold court immediately. You get to hold court, not booking a date with the government or the establishment. It's an independent judiciary. Independent means people, process and resource is all independent of the legislature, which is Parliament. So if you want to hold court, you hold court. You contact your local convener of the county and you would hold court. In a lockdown situation where they've locked all of their legislative courts and they've put all the judges at home and they're not allowed to go to work, how would you get justice if you couldn't hold your own courts? You couldn't. Right? They gifted me that case study. I couldn't have even dreamt that fucking case study up, honestly. Right? I couldn't have dreamt when I left in 2019 that I'd come back at 2020 and they'd have given me lockdowns as a live case study. Right? But, and we'll come into it. As we go forward now, you're going to find more and more people presenting you with solutions. Okay? All the solutions that you're going to be presented with will be valid for certain situations. Okay? That's why it's very rare you'll ever hear me badmouth a solution. I might go after an individual if the individual is running fallacy and they're trying to lead the nation with fallacy. I will go after them. I make no apologies for it. And after I've called them out, if they don't come back, I do get vicious with them. I'll take the gloves off and I'll go street with them. I don't mind swearing and getting ugly. I'll do it. Right? I'll delve into that realm to deal with them as and when I have to. It's not my first port of call, but I will do it. Right? So if you get people that come to you and say, look, the vaccines were really bad. Tick, sounds like a friend. You know, I'm going to expose all the MPs. Bloody hell, this guy sounds good. I'm going to expose and tell you that they're all paedophiles and child trafficking. This guy definitely sounds good. And I'm going to put in parliamentary sovereignty and direct referenda as the solutions. Everyone still thinks he sounds good because they don't understand what a solution looks like. They don't know what good looks like. They don't know how to do due diligence on a solution that someone's presenting to them. If you're going to buy a house, you do due diligence. You check if there'd been movement on the land or settling or cracks in the wall and stuff, right? Well, this building the house, an eternal house, or at least a house for generations to come, we shouldn't be accepting it emotionally just because someone gave us a little bit of rhetoric, right? Because there's a little bit of rhetoric. Andrew Bridgen for me is the opposition. You get gasps around most rooms. People will walk out. But he's telling us the truth. Yeah, but he's leading you back into tyranny. Parliamentary sovereignty makes Parliament sovereign. Is there anyone here that really thinks making Parliament sovereign will solve this? Parliamentary sovereignty, or their assumed sovereignty, already is what's created this problem. Their egos are out of control. They serve us. They're an admin function, not an authority. They're there to coordinate and cooperate, not control. So parliamentary sovereignty doesn't work. This is a key example of, wolf in sheep's clothing. Right? But people emotionally get attached because you've been so traumatized by the vaccine and the child trafficking that anyone that calls it out suddenly seems like a friend. That's dangerous. That's Lucifer's game. Beware of Lucifer.
Can I just say, I totally agree with you. I think his heart is genuine though, but he's stuck in an old way of thinking.
Possibly. And the other one is direct referenda. So direct referenda is majority mob rule. That means 51% could have subjected everyone to the vaccine. Well, majority mob rule is not a definition of democracy. And so I've called it out with him. I've said to him that if we can have an open debate, and if he can just prove logically that his solutions solve the problems of lockdown, I'll give him £1,000 of my own money. And if I'm right, he doesn't have to give me anything. And I've asked him directly.
Sorry, who are you talking about?
Andrew Bridgen.
I've just come back to England.
Sorry, Andrew Bridgen. So he's a politician, ex-politician that was conservative that stood up and he's calling out the vaccines and he's saying there's child trafficking. But he's proposing these two solutions as the solution.
Which two solutions?
It's parliamentary sovereignty and direct democracy, which is majority mob rule.
But nobody understands what that means, right? I see, yeah.
Yeah, right. And so people are jumping on that bandwagon. If you jump on a bandwagon, you vote straight back into tyranny. And so that's why. So I've called it out and I've proposed that to them and I've given them the option, but they can't come forward because for me, they're part of a deception. I don't believe that their hearts are genuine. I believe they're already pre-compromised. This is my personal opinion though. It doesn't mean I'm right, but I'm holding a very firm and solid line on what good looks like.
What does your good look like?
So that's the process that I'm just going through now, right? So from a bodily perspective, the right to bear arms must be reinstated as a law.
Under which conditions? The right to bear arms must be reinstated under law. Under which conditions?
Under
according
no
to you?
conditions. Under the right to bear arms, as long as you don't cause anyone else loss, harm, or injury, you carry. That's it. Same as is in Texas.
Anywhere. So on the street,
Absolutely.
in your house,
Yep.
anyone, any age, any.
Because you can be attacked. Your body can be put at threat anywhere.
Gun, according to you.
A 5-year-old can't carry a gun.
Okay, so please give me the actual conditions according to you. I'm asking you the question.
So the conditions and
You just said everyone, anywhere. That's not true. 5-year-old, no. Okay, so give me exactly.
Okay,
I'm
so
asking you a question.
with reasonable understanding,
Which is what?
which
According
is
to whom?
according to whatever
Reasonable
society
understanding.
decides, are reasonable legislation and laws for that.
But who is society?
But if a child's at 5, society's people in the community, and that is exactly what trial by jury is for. If a 5-year-old's in a house and someone comes in and the 5-year-old picks up dad's gun and pops them, because dad's trained the 5-year-old how to use a gun, and the 5-year-old's got the maturity to use a gun, who's to argue that? My son, as an example,
Picks up the gun and shoots mum by mistake 'cause
as
he's
an
upset.
yes, and my dad had. So we have the right to bear arms in Sikhism, and I've had weapons around the house all the time, including all sorts of firearms which are legal firearms around the house, and they've been there since the little one was 0. Just like when you go to France and kids can drink from the age of 12 and there's no binge drinking. There's a maturity to stuff when you introduce stuff from a young age. You don't get the binge mentality, and we see that throughout all of society, right?
Amazonian children have access to machetes.
I know, exactly. And in the Sikh and the nomadic Sikh tribe in India, the kids have access to the guns and that, but they don't shoot each other because you know what the consequence is, because you've been taught what the consequence is, right? And there's a huge educational process that has to happen, and we have to be able to go through that. But the right to bear arms is the divine right that exists in law. And with legislation that, and we can do that in the 11:30, we can start to scratch together what might the initial constraints look like, right? What does that condition set look like?
You've lost me a right to bear guns in your house or in the street.
No, that's fine, but that's yeah, that's fine, that's opinion. But if someone breaks into your house and they're about to rape you, what are you going to do if you haven't got a gun? Phone the police. It's too late by the time the police come. The crime's been committed.
It's absolutely 100% certified by many studies that if you're being attacked and somebody's attempting to rape you, the chances of you pulling out a gun and shooting the perpetrator are bordering on 0 to none.
In your own house, they border on almost 100% because he's got to get into your house. So you shoot him as he comes through the window. So people, all the active close security protection military guys that we work with, will run through these with you, with military experience of what violence and force looks like, having done it in the battlefield and in live scenarios. Right, the right to bear arms is a divine right, and it is the only way to protect yourself in the immediacy. That's a fact. Right, it might not work 100% of the time, but if it works 99 out of 100 rather than 0 out of 100 because you haven't got it, that's 99 people saved for 1 out of it.
The right to bear
Fine.
arms is a divine right fact according to whom?
According to natural law.
According to my natural law, it's not.
Well, natural law, if you look around the jungle,
There are no arms.
even the prey has arms.
There are no arms.
Well, according to your logic, we've removed the horns from the gazelle and the lion suddenly becomes peaceful.
Yes, exactly that. That's where
Right,
I
well, that's your logic. Well, that's good. Well, that's Lucifer's game for me. Right, that's love and light in the extreme, and you've lost the balance for me because you can't protect that. Right, you can't protect. If someone comes to attack you now, you've got no means to protect yourself. But that's you. But you may choose to live that way, and that's a sovereign right, and that's fine. But for me, that's not how you operate. That's not a divine right in any of the ancient scriptures or in nature when we observe nature. Okay.
What else do the ancient scriptures say?
I'd like to try and say something because I think
No, but then we have to also assess thousands of years of thinking, right? So that's also, when we look at Trivium Quadrivium, it teaches us a level of humility. When we've got great masters who put thousands of years of thinking into ancient texts, and then we write them off on a whim, then that's something we have to look at ourselves and our own reflection and projection at that point. Because you've written off something that billions of people understand, and the ancient texts all actually concur with each other.
I haven't written anything off.
You know, well, you just said the ancient texts, I don't care about the ancient
That's
texts.
literally not what I said at all.
So what did you
I
say?
actually say?
So
I
what did
said, and what else do the ancient texts say?
Well, truth.
You've just literally received
truth.
rejection, inverted it, and used it. To,
No,
like,
truth. Okay, so
Okay,
they say truth.
I think we should continue this. Is this something at 11:30 that we're doing?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, when we can
Yeah,
come to
absolutely.
consensus. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
brilliant because
Yeah, no problem.
we come to consensus and
Yeah.
then we get the answer.
Okay, no
Yeah,
problem.
there we go.
I'd like to, Sukh, I'd like to come in because I'm fascinated with this, and I feel like there's a little performance here. There's from a process work perspective, I really like that the bringing out in a space where we can actually reflect on the kind of emotions that come in when we actually start getting to like really, really important questions, you know?
Yeah.
And so I just sort of want to kind of welcome that kind of intensity, because it is actually, this is where the power is.
Definitely.
And we need to
And
to
the-
get
and-
to the point where everybody is right, and that is the
And that's
truth.
democracy.
That is
Right.
This
And
is
that's
so
democracy,
true.
because
Yeah,
in
this is-
democracy,
but this is-
I will...
sorry,
In,
I
in,
just wanted to be able to say something else.
Sorry, go on. This lady's speaking.
So I see, and what I'm curious, and I want to hone you in because you can ramble, but I love what you're talking about. I really want you to sort of share more of how you see it can work, because I see the potential for the trivium and this sort of. I've understood that there's a profundity in the trivium. With the grammar, logic, and rhetoric, doesn't immediately convey it. So I think you're kind of assuming some understanding.
well, I'm introducing the concepts here.
Yeah.
I can't give like a lifetime of study in an hour and a half.
I know
But I'm
that,
going
I know.
through it and giving the concept. Thank you.
I feel we've got limited time, and I'd like to hear what you've got to say.
Okay. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I'd like to hear
Right, so the trial by jury, it's a good point. So the trial by jury, what does it ultimately give us? It gives us democracy. And in a democracy, true democracy gives a power that one individual can live their life separate to everybody else. And everyone protects that individual's right to live that way. And that individual protects everyone else's right to live their way. It's what I call the protective hermit dynamic. Right, so if everyone wants to carry a gun and this lady doesn't, she has absolutely the right not to carry the gun. But she can't stop anyone else from doing it, as long as they're not causing anyone else loss, harm or injury, unless your inalienable rights are infringed and you're under attack. Right? So that's a democracy, is not a consensus majority mob rule. It means that if you want to take the vaccine because you're frightened of the virus, you can take it. And if you don't want to take it, you don't have to take it. That's what a democracy does. It gives each individual the right to express and live their life however they want, as long as they don't infringe on anyone else's inalienable rights.
I mean, that follows through on the freedom of speech, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Like, I'll defend your right to say
What
to
you
say,
want, even if I don't agree with it, completely, right? So I defend your right not to carry a gun, right? On the basis that there is someone on the perimeter looking after the area in which you're not carrying it, right? Because otherwise you'll end up like all the tribes in India and Africa that were all pacifist. They got obliterated when the barbarians came. When the dark side tested them, they couldn't stand up to it.
But would you say that was their choice? They had the choice to
But
do
that was their philosophy and ideology.
Yeah, but we don't have the choice to safeguard them. We don't have the obligation to safeguard them. It's their choice to become obliterated.
No, I'm not suggesting we should. What I'm doing is I'm giving you an example of if you take a complete extreme non-violent approach and someone comes to attack you, what defence have you got?
I totally
A
agree.
really good example of that is once the Vatican and the Pope took control of the Templars and institutionalised them, the first thing they did was wipe out the Cathars. The Cathars couldn't be touched while the Templars were protecting them. It was only once the Templars had been removed and neutralised that the Pope then used the Templars to destroy the Cathars. That in itself was psychopathy, because they were the Christian warriors that were protecting that Gnostic tribe. And there's a key example of what happens if you decide that you're going down the non-violent route. Those who were non-violent, that were protected by the warriors, also got obliterated. If you have an orchard of fruit, hedge it with thorny bushes to protect it. Someone has to be the thorny bushes. Those who understand the balance between the dark and the light have to do that. And it's not for everyone. Not everyone can be a warrior. Some are bards, some are druids. That's part of how it works. And that's an acknowledgement in nature. But democracy means each person can do it. So you can have legislation, but ultimately what you do on your land, in your jurisdiction at home, is no one else's business. That's English castle doctrine. That's why this is the greatest country to be alive at the greatest time on earth, is because that is something that has been set in stone in English here, in the English law. And that is why England is the greatest country on the modern map, right? Because that has been enshrined here, and that is what now will go back out as a governance system, because it puts the creator in the court, manifest as 12 jurors. And it's a completely inclusive system. And it gives everyone the right to live, and that's why you essentially live under your own choice of laws. as long as you don't choose to hurt somebody else, cause loss, harm or injury. And where does the loss, harm or injury come from? Loss of property, harm of mind, injury of body. Loss, harm and injury aren't random. They come back to that mind, body, property. 3 ways you can be attacked. 3 divine laws to protect them. Right, in the immediacy and from government tyranny. And the third one is trust law, right? Private trust law. Because the highest trust that you get is that trust between the creator, the material universe, which is the assets, our soul, which is the trustee, and the body, which is the beneficiary. Okay, the grantor put the material universe into the material trust, the divine trust. Right? The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The Father is the grantor. The Son is the beneficiary, is the body, consumes the material world. It eats, it drinks, bread and fishes. But the soul cannot benefit from the material world. Doesn't matter how hungry the soul is, how much you eat, drink, you know, whatever you try to find, perfect, whatever it is, it won't satisfy the soul. Because the soul can't benefit from the material world. So the soul is the trustee that manages that process between the body and the material world. That's the initial divine trust. The Bible outlines that divine trust, and then from there it outlines all of the aspects that come as part of that trust and part of the deception, or part of the alternative system of control, as I put it, the non-living aspect of it, the legal. Trust law, if the best place to go for trust law at the moment is with the sovereigntrust.net. Is a website that a number of people put together. They're all professionals. They paid for most of those trusts that you can pay for. They paid for about 6, 7 different trusts, and they amalgamated it into one trust document. And if you go on there, it's got all the details to educate yourself and write your own trust document. .net, including the documents and the full process for everything, including correcting your status, taking your property out of the land registry, changing it into the trust name, TX1s, RX1s, whatever, all that. I don't know the property stuff because it's not my bag, but it's all on there. The people that have done it have helped write those bits. And you get the letter back from the private bank saying that this bank account is outside of tax jurisdiction, HMRC, whatever it states. But you'll get a lot of pushback trying to do it. Okay, they don't like you doing it. The first couple we did, then all of a sudden they were like, we're not doing it for you anymore. But because we knew the process, the lady had to push it through. But he was very nervous notarising those documents because the lodges have told them they're not supposed to do it. But the lodges have twisted the Masonic constitution. But that's a whole different thing for the Q&A if you want it. Right? But the trust law stuff, go to that. And you should, before you start a fight, you should prepare for your fight. Never go into a fight without training for it. Right? So your training in this instance is putting assets that you can't afford to lose into trust. Moving your cars and stuff, your V5, all of that stuff that you need to do that first, then pick the fights. Otherwise I get phone calls in the middle of the morning like there's someone knocking at the door. I haven't done anything, what do I do? And then we've got rapid response teams and everything else. Those are supposed to be last ditch emergency teams. They're not supposed to be first call responders. They're supposed to be paperwork and thinking done before we hit the rapid response team and the shield and everyone else that's out there. Right? And I'll support anyone that is trying to put in place immediate protection for mind, body, or property. At an individual level, or at a national level, or anywhere in between. Right? If anyone's doing it, that's why I try and assess those solutions based on, are they providing immediate protection for mind, body, and property? And are they providing protection against national tyranny? If those two are covered, for those 3 aspects, then you've got a solution that holds us in freedom. If any of those 3 are missing, we will fall back into tyranny. Right? They're the 3 laws that are in the English Constitution. The 4th one is what we call the safety cutout fuse, right? Which is Article 61, which states that if any of those 3 are under threat or your inalienable rights are infringed, you have to use your trust to fund your courts and your militia. You use the courts to hold courts of jurisdiction, a verdict, so you get a legitimate, evidenced verdict, and then you use your militia to enforce and uphold the law. That's how it works. Without any of those three, you haven't got freedom, you're in tyranny. Some of that requires the dark arts. Some of that means some people have to get ugly. But you can't legislate evil out of the world. Sometimes you've got to give good men guns and set them free. It's always been that way. That's it. It's dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. But it's a beautiful journey, and it's that that makes it exciting.
Do you think that might have been caused by the slaughter of the Druids in 57 AD? Because that was...
So that is certainly part. I mean, if I come to the later, to contemporary history for me, it's a contentious one for people. The Cabal use a technique called mowing the lawn. Right, some of you may or may not be for it, right? So what happens is they'll go into an area where they're controlling every 20 to 40 years, and they will basically genocide all males between 15 and 40. Right, so it's been happening in Punjab since 1947. It's been happening in Palestine since Palestine was created. It's been happening in England since 1066. Right, it happened in England, Germany last time was at World War II, when all the alpha males in Northwest Europe were genocided. Right, ultimately they were genocided. Why did they choose England and Germany particularly? Is because the Germanic tribes and English, Celtic tribes were the ones that pushed back the Western Roman Empire the most. You held them back the longest in Europe. Therefore, you suffered the most once they took control. Suleiman Shah, Ertugrul Ghazi, and what later became the Ottoman Empire held them back during the 1200s in Middle East. That's why Palestine is a hotbed, right? We were the last empire to fall in South Asia, Punjab Empire. Maharaja Ranjit Singh held them until mid-1800s, right? Which is why we're still being genocided there. All the hotspots in the world today where the genocides are taking place are where those tribes held back Western Roman Empire's Vatican satanic march. And those places are where the hotspots are today. And you can see that right across the world, those places. Those not that they don't forget when they have a grudge. But the thing is, where they're going to come unstuck now is that the three ancient scriptures of the Holy Land all concur with each other. The Quran states that the true custodians of the Holy Land are the righteous Jews. Do you know that? That's what the Quran states. The Quran and the Hadiths, the Islamic texts state that. The righteous Jews are the custodians of the Holy Land. So does the Gospels, and so does the Torah. So it makes you wonder what the fuck's going on, in the Holy Land. What's going on is they've relabeled it Israel and Palestine and created a duality for people to fall into. Right? Truth is neither in Palestine or in Israel, because it's neither of those in the ancient scriptures. It is the Holy Land. But all three scriptures also state something else that has to happen. Before the righteous Jews are installed, those who call themselves Jews but are not must be removed. Okay? All three books also state that. The Torah also states that. And those who follow Rabbi Satmar's legacy, who's my rabbi, I'm Sikh, but I have a rabbi, I have an imam, there's sheikhs I follow. Because if I need to study something, I'll go to those who understand those texts. And you know who understands it because they're interpreting it with love, not with fear. And how can you tell that? I'll give you an example of how you can tell. I'll use Aesop's fable as an example because it has less emotion in it. So we'll use the hare and the tortoise as an example. And I don't know how long we've got, what time it is now, but... Quarter of an hour, perfect. All right, so we'll end with this little bit. So this gives you an example. When we talk about the trivium, quadrivium, and all the sophistication and how the truth and the lies gets twisted, right? Aesop's fable, hare and the tortoise. All of us know that story, right? Slow and steady wins the race. We were taught that. But if I was an imam in an extremist mosque, or I was one of the Zionist rabbis in one of those synagogues, or I was a sort of evangelical priest that runs with the State of Israel narrative, I would explain to you, my congregation this morning, my dear hares, what you must understand is that 1,000 years ago it was not a race but a battle that was waged. And the tortoises committed great humiliation on our tribe. They destroyed our honour, and we must reinstall that. We must de-shell every tortoise and reinstall the honour of the hares. This is what they did to us. This is how they disgraced us. And ever since then, we've been downtrodden. Is that the story of the hare and the tortoise? But I could tell it that way. Into a congregation of morons, I could feed it and rile them up the wrong way. And unfortunately, in the age of darkness, most people are in moron zone. Right? That's how it is. That's where the vibration is. Unless you're vibrating at a high frequency, like everyone here is, because you've stepped out of that. Just the fact you stepped out of it to start with shows that there's a level of that high frequency. Right? But you know that when I told that story, it didn't resonate with you. Right? Obviously, I can tell it. But that's what they do. One is interpreted with love. The other is interpreted with fear. With love, I'll explain to you that what happened when the Roman tyranny and the Pharisees tried to drown Christ in Roman maritime law was that he walked on their water. He walked on their jurisdictional water. When they tried to take him into that courtroom and drown him in the sea, the waves parted for him because he knew who his father was, and when the waves parted, his feet stayed on terra firma, law of the land. So we can use fear and we can laugh at it and literalize it and say man can't walk on water, not to say that Creator can't create that miracle, do what he likes, right? But in reality, there's a fight happening here now. There's a fight that he had there, then, and he was fighting it. And he wrote a complete document to explain everything from top down. And he wasn't the only one. Others have done it during the times, in different times and spaces. But all those three texts concur for that reason, because they all serve the same master. Whether they're the Knights Templars, whether the Denarius Mali Assassins, when they were under correct leadership, under the Creator, they were all the militia of heaven. But when they were taken over by Satan's henchmen, they all became the militia of Satan, the militia of hell. And it's those flags then that start to cause confusion, because people are getting loyal to a flag or to a symbol rather to the energy of the action of the people that bore them at the time. Templars, for me, are the greatest heroes of Templars. I love the Temple. I'm in tears when I go to a temple in London where Sir William Marshall's buried. Right, Sir William Marshall held that, the Battle of Rochester, all single-handedly almost at the end, if you watch Ironclad. There, why you should be proud to be English. Look, my hair on my hands, on my arms are standing up. And I was only born here. Right, but I connect to it because I know our shaheeds, our martyrs, they had that. I recognise that energy. Because they preferred death to life as a slave. They understood that. That when you understand that under the Creator, you can't lose because you become fearless. Why? Not because you're a mad person, because you realise you'll either live as a king in this realm under the Creator, in which case your reign is here, or you become a martyr in its courts. And while the king's reign ends with his last breath, a martyr's reign begins with his last breath. That's why the martyrs are always circling, and they can never be beaten because they're eternal in their spirits. So when we do the cacao ceremonies, do the other stuff, I always say to people, make sure you summon people that are on our side, or at least don't summon someone I can't kill. You know? So when you're doing that, they're the spirits that you're invoking. If you haven't got the martyr spirit, then don't do the cacao ceremonies, because then you haven't got the right people around you to protect you in that realm. You need to have those masters around you. You need to have those who understand that, who are prepared to die on their sword to protect you. They're the people you want around you. And that's what they did. We're here today having this discussion with these freedoms because they did that. If you want to follow the truth, follow deception, follow the trail of blood. If you want to find the deception, follow the trail of money. Simple. Right? They're simple rules for a simple game that is created complex with emotion and fear and a lack of education and clarity of thinking. But all of the bits that I've covered today, all the resources for teaching your children, learning it yourself, are all on that blog. When we go at 11:30, I'll jot it. If there's a board, I'll jot it up for you.
What was the name of that again?
It's minds.com
Mind.com.
/sovereign mind. Cool. Now we'll have some vodka and then we'll go and have 11:30. No, thank you. Cool. No, thank you. I think we covered it. But my only ask of you that is that when people are presenting those solutions, just assess them against that little matrix. It's because some people will have part solutions. I'll still back people, right? Peacekeepers have a part solution. Peacekeepers' solution for fighting stuff that's happening in the courts is great. But like I said to Mark, if the courts are locked down, you've got nothing to audit. right? So there is a space for that, but we also need a solution for when absolute tyranny hits. They've locked everything down, right? And they've taken what are the solutions that the ancient forefathers of this island left us? And it's come from Dane law and England and everything else. It's not just, it was just an English rose that gave it. Right, like in Punjab, this has been a centre for constant battle. Lahore has, the Holy Land has, and Punjab has. Right, all three of them very halo ground. No, I'm not just saying that because I'm born here, come from there, but there's a reason that synchronicities happen. I'm humble in that synchronicity. I get why we're here, and we're blessed to be here. I'm buzzing completely. I have been since at least the beginning of lockdown, and it's just getting more and more. And the more that this is happening, why? Because we're not talking about problems anymore. You're going out and living that which is what we're fighting for. Right? You're living it. We're fighting for people to live like this. And so people now are living like this in these numbers. That's what it's about. Right? People say you're winning. Well, does that look like losing to you? No, it's not, because you're going out and making it happen, and that's it. Anyone comes to you, make sure that they are genuinely for freedom. We need those immediacies. And even if you don't want to be violent yourself, somewhere on a border somewhere, someone is going to have to secure that zone for you. Right? Otherwise, we end up like the Cathars did. And that was in Western Europe. That's why Catalonia, the Catalan referendum, the Cathars gave the Vatican the biggest pushback spiritually. They couldn't be defeated because they had the knowledge that we have, the Gnostic knowledge. Right? If there's a good speaker in there, I'll play for you a little bit of what the last parfait of the Cathars sang in 17, I think it was 31 or something, but 700 years later it was 2021. Right, to do the maths, my head's gone a bit blank, I need to get some milk. But yeah, but it was there, and I'll play that. That's why it's important that we put it in place. That's why I back the Shield as well now. Some people may have seen the Shield and stuff online. The Shield is operating purely in the legal. That's something you have to understand. It's not operating in the lawful. This is coming from someone that's operated purely in the lawful for 5 years. People that don't want to do it the way the Shield are doing it, we've given that solution for 5 years. No one has to register, nothing, give no details. Nothing is stopping people from walking the streets as common law constables in your own power as English sovereigns. Nothing is stopping that. But people aren't engaging with it because many people out there where the resources are too frightened. They've got businesses, they've got estates they're not going to let go of. So after 5 years, Chris and the other guys have looked at that, and they're going to have to build protection for the little ones and the women in the legal jurisdiction as well as the lawful jurisdiction. When we get to the pearly gates and he asks us, why didn't you look after that little one? And we go, because Chris set it up in the legal jurisdiction. Yeah, it's not going to look favourably on us. Right? You go, I sent you him to look after him in that jurisdiction because all those resources were there. So why did you turn your back on him when you had the framework for understanding what tyranny looks like? Right? And so they know that. So I'm in that space, but I'm in that space. I also let them know that to do everything you want, you don't need all the legislative stuff. You need that to chase certain people, to investigate them, to survey them, and to hold them to account in the legal courts, to hunt down the child trafficking networks and whatever else you might want, may not want to do in protecting children. For that stuff, you may or may not legal stuff. But to go and protect the innocent souls on the street, the natural law, the universal law gives us that right. We don't need that in writing from anybody. Nothing is stopping the men of this country or the women of this country walking the streets and going out and doing what they need to do. The reason I say men first is men are biologically trained and designed to deal with trauma differently to women. Right? When men suffer trauma, they get stronger. When women suffer trauma, they lose the femininity and innocence that is that feminine essence. That's why a father's job is to nurture that feminine essence in his daughter and create that protective environment. Then when she goes to the husband, he then has the role of creating that protective environment to nurture that feminine essence. It's not a chauvinistic, sexist thing. It's the reality of how nature is put together. Accept it or forever be competing with your partner. But I'm just letting you know how it is. Then. Enjoy it. Take care.